All right. Welcome, Buddy Powers, to the Self Employment Success Podcast. Excited to have you here today.
Yeah, what's up, Leland? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Folks may remember the first episode of the Self Employment Success Podcast was with John Powers. So today we have his brother, Buddy Powers, on the podcast. It's a whole family of entrepreneurs. So, Buddy, tell us a little bit to start just about yourself, your family, your business, and where it stands today.
Yeah, so it's funny you mentioned family of entrepreneurs. I was just talking to my dad last night, who just sold his business and is retiring, and we were reflecting on how most of the people in our family own a business. They don't, for whatever reason. There's exceptions to that, but it's in our blood, I guess. Yeah, so my wife and I own a farm and a wedding venue, and technically now a micro resort. But I don't know. That sounds a little grandiose to call it that. But really, we just have
Micro
lodging.
resort.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what the zoning now says. Basically, we wanted to build lodging on the farm, and that's the only definition under our existing county zoning that would allow the lodging we wanted to have. So um, we
It's
also
got to be
have,
good for marketing.
yeah. Well, that's why I say like this is probably the first time I've said that in any sort of public setting that is technically that. But yeah, no, really, it's a working farm, a wedding venue. We have lodging on site. We also built um, basically like an agrarian neighborhood where my in-laws now live, where my brother John's in-laws have a house. My mom and dad have built and are building a house over there. So yeah, and we have several friends that have built or are building houses on that part of the farm too. So yeah, it's a lot of fun, and it's been a good journey to where we are today, and excited about where we're headed.
So, knowing a little bit about your background, you grew up in Northern Virginia,
Yep.
which for anybody who's been to Northern Virginia, there's not a ton of farmland in that area. It's
No,
not
none
the most
left.
agricultural, not the
Yeah.
most agricultural industry just outside DC. But so, how did you get into that? What made you like you went to college? Did you study farming? Where did the love for farming and owning a farm come in? How did you get started on this journey?
Yeah, that's a good question. Growing up in the suburbs of outside of DC was a great way to grow up. Wouldn't change that, but it was definitely devoid of anything remotely farm related. And I think in part that's what like got me curious, like what is a farm really like? Even at like a young age, when we'd go on like a road trip, say, we'd get out into like farm country, just stirred something in me, not even knowing where that might lead, right? But in high school, when like, your guidance counselor would ask you what you wanted to do, I was kind of a punk, but I would be like, I want to be a farmer, just to, because they're like, they have no like gauge for putting you on
Right.
any track for that.
You don't want to be a politician or a
Yeah.
consultant.
Yeah, you don't want to be a yeah, attorney, a doctor, or whatever. Yeah, like yeah. So I went to when I was in college, I was studying philosophy, so not agriculture. Down at CNU, one of the greatest institutions in the Commonwealth. It's where I met my wife, and yeah, a lot of blessings came from that season of life. But anyway, at Christopher Newport University, I'm studying philosophy, and I come across this book called The Omnivore's Dilemma, which is by Michael Pollan. He's a great speaker now for all of the sustainable or regenerative agriculture movement. But he was a professor up in I want to say NYU, somewhere up New York. He was a professor, and he got curious about where our food comes from. And so in this book, it's all about where we get our food in the Western world. And I'm this philosophy guy. I'm interested in the same things. I have this dream in the back of my head that I could be a farmer, but no context for what that could look like. And I come across this farm in the book called Polyface Farm, which happens to be right here in Virginia. And Polyface is one of the foremost regenerative livestock farms in the world. The founder, Joel, speaks all over. He's got like TED Talks, and he's written a ton of books. So anyway, I go down that rabbit hole of just all the Polyface stuff and reading the books, um, and I find out they have this internship, and so I tried to get a year-long apprenticeship, which I did not get. But they said, hey, but we'll give you the internship, which is just a summer-long program.
Mm.
So after graduating college, I went and did this internship at Polyface, and that was like jumping into the deep end of farming. You're working, 6 days a week, and they did give us a day off, which was great. But it was a really cool experience. Like, okay, this is what my dream. This is the reality. Like, remove the
Mm.
romanticism. This is what it's really going to be like. So that was pretty cool. And then from there, I got after that summer, I got a contract with Polyface to manage one of their farms because they have multiple farms near their home farm in near Stanton, Virginia. So yeah, started farming by myself completely at one of their rental farms under a contract with them, and that's the farm where Jill and I got married. So I'm trying to think that I
Mm.
guess that was before we met, Leland. That was
Yeah, I've only ever known you with Jill.
yeah, okay. Yeah, so that was our like backyard wedding at our first farm was kind of where the dream for the wedding venue started as well. We loved our wedding and just the setting. It's
Mm.
a wedding at a private property. I know you've been to weddings here at the farm and at other beautiful places. There's something about that versus like a ballroom or something that's much more man-made and yeah. And so
Mm.
to this day, we still hear people saying like, "Oh, your wedding was so cool. It was just so beautiful," and not because it was that nice or anything. It was just that setting that made it so special and the people that were
Mm.
there. So yeah, that's where that dream started. And well, there's kind of the long version and the short version of this story, but the medium version of this story is I did the rental farming thing with Polyface for 4 years, I believe it was, yeah. And no, I'm sorry, 3 years. And during that time, Jill, she had started a wedding photography business in college, and she was doing it on the side before we got married while she was working a marketing job. Once we got married, she left the marketing job, moved onto the farm with me, and started shooting weddings as her like full time thing, even though it wasn't quite full time yet. Um, but that also was the other big driving factor for starting a wedding venue because I started shooting weddings with her as well. And so we'd go to all these different wedding venues, and it was like years of market research of seeing like, okay, this is how this
Mm.
place does it. And her business really started to grow. I mean, she was shooting more and more weddings at more and more upscale places. She started traveling a lot, shooting. Um, yeah, and so it was like we had these parallel but like very different vocations of like farming, up before dawn,
Yeah.
seeing every sunset outside, and then on the weekends we'd get somebody to babysit the farm for the afternoon, and we'd go shoot a wedding go into DC or go down to Charleston, South Carolina. We'd shoot a wedding,
Mm.
we'd come back to the farm, and just keep rolling. So
Gosh.
those were busy years for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it. So, yeah, just the fact that farming, you mentioned this, like it was nice that they gave us a day off. And in my head, I'm
Yeah.
thinking like most people get 2 days off,
Yeah, oh yeah.
but
Once
not
we
with
started
farming.
farming, no, yeah. Once
Yeah,
we were on
that's
our own, we basically had no days off. The only days off were when we went to go shoot a wedding. So
yeah, and you needed to have someone babysit the farm. And then
yeah.
so you are fresh into this farming, you're doing it for 4 years, kind of mostly just farming. And then Jill is running her own wedding photography business.
Hmm.
And then how did you guys end up at your current farm, Big Spring? And because you sort of, like you said, you were doing market research kind of over here, you're doing the farm, you have the vision. How did the vision come together? How did you marry those two things?
Yeah, we had the most credit I can take for it in terms of the all of it coming together was uh Jill and I being willing to have those dreams and actually like um consider that they could become a reality because we thought like maybe someday we'll start a wedding venue. Maybe someday we'll find the perfect farm to do that at. And that someday, it always seemed like it was really far away. but we were willing to like, this is what we want to do someday.
Mm.
Someday came much sooner than we thought. My brother was instrumental in connecting us with the couple that used to own Big Spring. They were looking for a young couple to give it new purpose, new vision, and they needed to be out of this property, and so or wanted to be, out of this property. So yeah, so we connected with them, with the previous owners through my brother, and we told them our vision, which was, hey, we want to build a working farm, um, centered around a wedding venue. We want to build community centered around an agricultural existence, and that's grown into also one that pours into marriages and relationships too. So we had like the seeds of that we shared with the previous owners of Big Spring, and they said, "Hey, we love that." God's timing and all, it's crazy because they were willing to say to two, gosh, I think we were 23 years old at the time, 24 or something, two kids basically, yeah, okay, we'll trust you with this property. And they leased it to us for a couple of years, and that gave us the runway to test all of our theories of starting the venue and that working, moving the farm here and that working, continuing to shoot weddings. Yeah, and so we just made the jump. We put everything we energy wise, resource wise into starting the farm, and yeah, here we are.
And was a part of the fact that like, hey, we moved to Big Spring, we're now managing this space. Was the fact that like that's when the wedding venue started because with the Polyface farm you had Polyface kind of telling you what you could and could not do? Is that how that worked? And now on Big Spring it's yours. It's totally your freedom to make the farm do whatever you need to do, or really whatever you want to do with the space. Was there like a freedom of moving to Big Spring that kind of allowed you to do that, or was it just Big Spring was a better venue for it, like a more suitable space to have a wedding venue? I guess I'm just curious.
Yeah, Big Spring. Well, so at the first farm where Jill and I got married, we didn't own that property, right? That was a farm that Polyface rented the farmland on, and we rented the house on. And the owners actually lived in Charlottesville, so and they're really really sweet people. To especially you can tell to let us have our wedding in on their property. But we thought about maybe we could turn that into a wedding venue, and it just didn't feel right at the time. So yeah, we were kind of looking for that perfect place. And when we found Big Spring, knowing, the years of market research, right, shooting weddings, knowing what to look for, it was like, oh my goodness, this has lots of different views in a really compact area, has a really cool old building, really unique spring-fed lake right at the middle of it. There's nothing else like that, certainly in the area, and also it's on this big acreage, but it's really close to a town that has tons of hotels and restaurants, and there's caterers. It was like, man, this is it is very unique. There's not a lot of places that have all of those things. And like I said, we've shot weddings not just in Virginia, but all over. Um, so yeah, so there's definitely something unique about Big Spring, um, that is almost hard to put your finger on, even just sort of like the feel of the property. But when you're
Mm.
here, there's we kind of knew like this really could work. The previous owners of Big Spring were like, "Do you think people would want to get married here?" And they were kind of a little bit like, "Are you sure?" And we're like, "Oh yeah, we're sure."
Which that's that is an interesting observation because it is incredibly beautiful. Like
Mm-hmm.
your property, for those who have never seen it, go look them up online. I mean, it really is probably one of the most beautiful venues I've ever seen. And I don't know if this was just maybe before the times of the like outdoor wedding. Is that like a new era thing? But I mean, it's funny to hear someone say like, would someone really want to get married here? I'm like,
Yeah,
have you seen it?
yeah,
Of course they
yeah,
would.
yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah, absolutely.
I've
Yeah.
been to
So
a handful of weddings there. I mean, John's included, your brother, and I mean,
right,
every time you're just like, this is an awe-inspiring place. I mean, it's
yeah.
just completely beautiful.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's where I say like at what I said at the beginning, like um, there's that balance like with entrepreneurship. because there's so many things that are out of your control that line up when something works, and there's things that you definitely do and stand for to make something work, right? But yeah, the beauty of Big Spring is we've redone buildings and added landscaping and stuff, but really it's just the way God made it. It's a unique, very special, very beautiful place that, yeah, when you come to visit, like, whoa, how did I not know about this place? That's what I remember thinking the first time I came up the driveway. So
Yeah. So, okay, you've moved on to the Big Spring lot, and
mhm,
now we're like all guns ablazing towards, all right, we are launching this wedding venue. So now we have wedding venue that we're trying to market, get the word out about, get, landscaped and ready for events,
you know,
which also includes probably finding caterers to partner with and workers to help put out chairs and tables and tents and things. And we still have the wedding photography business,
mhm,
and we're farming. We haven't even
yeah,
gotten to the micro resort level or the
no,
neighborhood across the street on the
yeah,
farm. I'm like, we basically just added a third relatively full-time business into the mix with your other two full-time businesses.
right, right.
So what was it like balancing that? Like I mean, I'm running one business and it's a lot to balance. And so,
Yeah, I don't know that we did a great job of that. I mean, the reality of so we moved so the first year, the reality was we had Jill's business on the photography side of things was probably having its biggest year, to date, and so we felt comfortable about that. Okay, good, we have that rolling. On the farming side of things, we were walking away from this contract relationship with Polyface amicably. It was just like, hey, we're going to go do something else. And they said, good luck. And we still talk often with those guys at Polyface. But that was like, we didn't realize it until we were leaving that contract relationship that it was a safety blanket in our minds, like when you enter into that deal, it's like, hey, we know we're going to make this much money as long as we produce this much stuff for you. Um, so yeah, I balancing all of that. Once we walked away from the contract, we suddenly had no sales in the farm
man,
side of the business. So we had to really start all over. We did have all the equipment. I had, now like 4 years of farming experience, which was helpful. And yeah, and we had just enough capital to get that going alongside of launching the wedding venue as well. So within the first year, we we thought, oh, we're going to farm mostly and kind of do weddings on the side. And we realized in terms of like balancing things, I think just being willing to shift was huge, because we realized like the farm is not going to be able to be the focus. This wedding venue thing is taking off. I think we wanted to do like 5 weddings our first year just to kind of work out all the kinks and make sure we knew. And we they were all like friends' weddings basically, so that we could and that we had no major issues, thankfully, but so we could learn. And we ended up doing 7 weddings the first year, and I think for the next year we booked like 20 some weddings,
oh
and
my
then for the
gosh,
year after that it was like doubled again. So
wow,
we quickly there was year one where we did farm. We moved everything there. We started farming. We did the 7 weddings, and then year two, I believe we farmed and did the weddings. And I realized like I can't do both of these, so I had to leave farming behind for a couple of years actually. We only just raised like a little bit, basically became like homesteaders, but
mm,
just enough for our family and share with friends and stuff. But we didn't raise enough to sell really. And that was a big, like, I didn't realize until I was walking away from, like, with the contract, when I was walking away from farming, that was like a big part of my ego that I
mm.
was like, I'm a farmer now. I'm the suburban boy that has fought for years to be a farmer. And and all of a sudden I'm going to hang it up. Like, what does that mean? And that was a good lesson to realize, like, hey, my identity is not in these things I'm doing. It's really easy. I did not realize until I stepped away from farming for a couple years how much my identity was wrapped up in I'm a farmer.
Yeah,
And I think we all do that with, I'm I know finance, or I am
Yeah.
a real estate guy, or whatever. So yeah, that was a great lesson for me, and I'm honestly needing to relearn it all the time because my identity slips into things that aren't really me, you know?
Hmm. So, okay. So because you're running three businesses, it became just too much. So it was like, all right,
Yes.
we need to shift. We need to make a choice. And we're going to choose the wedding venue because that's really taken off. And we're going to kind of
Yep.
go with that momentum. And were you the one primarily doing the legwork on the wedding venue, or did you have like a manager or a staff? Like, what did that? I don't have zero idea what it takes to run a wedding venue, but
Yeah, we in the beginning we did not have any staff or anything on the farming side or the wedding venue side. I mean, I think actually I think I had like one helper who would do like a couple days on the farm with me and would work the event with me, the wedding event at the farm with me, and that was year one. That was one of the lessons we learned, right? That didn't really affect the wedding day was awesome, but like I remember after our first wedding, I was just laying on the floor. It felt like I had been in like, like a fight or something. I was just so physically exhausted from running around carrying stuff and, making sure people were happy all day. And yeah, I realized we need more people.
yeah.
So yeah, very quickly, in that second year, we started to build a team of people to help us with the event side of things.
And then what changed to be able to bring back farming? Because as I understand it, now you've reintegrated the farming aspect. So
Yeah.
something's changed. I don't that something has changed to give you that capacity to be able to do that. But I
Hmm.
also know you've had four children enter the mix in this time frame.
Yes.
So I'm like, it's not like your life has really slowed down. So
No. Yeah.
what's happened to be able to say, all right, I can get back to being the farmer?
Hmm. Well, one thing I would say is we've been really fortunate to hire key people that do things in the event business that I can do, but I don't do as well as these hires do, or I'm just not as passionate about it. So one thing that has changed that today versus when we first started is we now have an admin um, who helps with all of the emails and the um, all there's so much that she does that all of the like behind the scenes stuff that used to keep me in front of the computer for hours a day. um, she takes care of, and then we have our farm manager Bailey, who is the man. I think you've met Bailey Leland,
Hmm.
maybe. Yeah,
Yeah, I have. He's great.
he's awesome. All my friends that watch the show Yellowstone say he's like our Rip, because he's like he'll do anything for you. He's just like, yes sir, yes ma'am. He's an awesome young guy. He's married, has two kids, so he works for us full time, and that created the bandwidth for me to lean into the things that were kind of like bigger picture, um, and also just things that I started to learn about myself. That like, hey, you're good at um, as an example, you're good at envisioning what this part of the property could become. Like that just naturally happens for me, and I enjoy doing, drawing out an addition to the barn or designing where these cottages could go. And yeah, so it gave me the bandwidth to lean into that kind of stuff, which has led to buying, another farm and doing the neighborhood over there, and also the lodging on the property as well.
And I'm struck something you haven't talked about yet, but that I was recording an episode a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about how a lot of people know their trade, but don't totally understand business, or like the idea of like running the business side of it can be really difficult. Or there's people who really love business and can do business no matter what the trade is and are fine to sell widgets and do whatever it is, but they really love
Yeah.
running a business. For you, having had vision of farmer, farming, running a farm, and then having vision of, wedding venue, and Jill's an entrepreneur, has there always been a business side to it? What was it like for you to enter into that space as, I have to create a profit and loss statement. I have to like do these things that aren't formally taught in a philosophy major, And
Mm.
so what was
Yeah.
it like for you throughout this journey entering into the business side of all these businesses? Because now you're running multiple, I don't know if they're
Hmm.
multiple LLCs or holding companies. When you have multiple
Yeah.
businesses, you can have quite the complex uh like structuring to all of that. So
Yeah.
what has that been like for you, just going through that learning curve?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, we have a great accountant.
Very important. Everyone
Yeah,
get a good accountant.
yeah. If you're listening to this, you have to have an account. The
Yeah.
first year in business, I thought I don't need an accountant, and I tried to read the IRS tax code, and it's like,
You just
I
started
mean,
reading the code itself?
yeah. I just
That's the
thought
most
I'll just
ridiculous thing
read it
ever.
and I'll be able to understand. And it's like,
It's
no.
like thousands of pages
Oh yeah,
of
it's huge.
Greek.
You can't. Yeah, yeah. It's not even. It's like a different language. And yeah, so quickly realized not possible. Yeah, I think I actually like. I was just talking to a couple buddies who are like super successful business guys, and I was joking that I don't love business, and I think what I meant was like um, I have this tendency to like go to the next thing, just go like always going to the next thing, um, and I'll kind of binge like, okay, this is the plan, this is the financials, this is how we're going to make it work, and then I just start, you know.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I've really had to grow in that, to be honest with you, because I not everything has worked. We've tried things and put money behind things that kind of worked. Like, oh, okay, that didn't financially work the way we thought it was going to. And we've had that, I guess, like honestly on the losing or breaking even end, and then on the other end too. So
Mhm.
so yeah, that's something I've had to really learn and grow in. And that's something I realized that's key to vision is like, yeah, it's great if you have all these ideas and if you can start moving and executing, which I'm also good at. Um, but yeah, frankly, slowing down and realizing that I do enjoy and can be good at putting together those profit and loss things, but also, frankly, there's a point where I need I need somebody on my team who's really good at that stuff. Um, and I know that for the longest time, when I heard someone say that, I thought like, well, I can't really afford, you know, um, to hire somebody to do that.
Mhm.
And um, I totally get that. I felt that same way, and financially, we were in that same place. But my if I could talk to my former self, I would say like, dude, just keep pushing, because if you can keep pushing and lean into what the value you can add to whatever it is you're doing. My case, farming and events and photography. Lean into the value you can add, because if you create just enough bandwidth, it's going to be so worth it to get that person that can help you pay your taxes and keep your financials straight, so that you can keep doing the thing that you're better at than paying and then reading the tax code and understanding it, in my case. So or
Reading the tax
keeping
code
your
is so
your
key.
monthly your or however business do it, but yeah, your monthly cash flows and all that stuff in check.
I
So
think
yeah,
that
our
that
accountant does all our bookkeeping now, all of that stuff for us.
I think that that is that thought is so paramount. I really want to highlight that, not just on the accountant side, but the idea of to to really figure out how am I spending my time, and what is the most valuable way for me to spend my time. How can I really do more of that, the stuff that I'm really good at, that I really love doing, where I can provide value. And for all these other tasks that suck that time, how do I outsource that? And
Mm,
I'm with you. I understand the thought behind, I can't just hire an army of people. I can't
right.
just throw money at all of my problems. You do have to work hard and grind, and there are seasons where you have to be doing every role by yourself. But as soon as you
Mm-hmm.
can, to be able to say, what's the most valuable use of my time, and how do I just do that more? And therefore, what do I need on the other side? Is it a bookkeeper, because bookkeeping takes forever and is just dry and I don't want to do it? I heard someone recently talk about like figuring out what your hourly pay is. Like, what is my hourly wage that
Mm-hmm.
I'm setting for my value? Is it $500 an hour? Is it $1,000 an hour? And then looking and saying, well, is creating an Instagram post worth $500 an hour? Probably not. So I will
Yeah.
outsource that. But you know, for me, like building someone's financial plan and developing their recommendations, that's worth that. Like that's valuable time, and that's something I like doing and something I'm good at. And so to kind of figure out like where do I add that value? How do I add that value? And then for all these other things that have to be done because it's part of a business and there are other hats and roles that we're all wearing, how do I figure out how to outsource that? Is it bringing someone onto my internal team, hiring an employee, or is it bringing someone onto my greater team by outsourcing to a CPA or a virtual assistant, or, you know, fill in the blank? But I think that's a really, um, like that thought that you just gave is really valuable for all entrepreneurs starting out in their journey or kind of entering their
Yeah.
journey and hitting that bandwidth mark where it's like,
Yeah.
I can't do every piece of this on my own.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely, I mean, that's not, I don't think it's every person's entrepreneurial story, but I think a common one is where you feel like we are in the trenches right now and I'm doing everything I can and I can't imagine, hiring somebody else. And that's where I think of like to that person, it's like, well, hey, think about where you're providing the most value and keep leaning into that. Maybe you missed putting together your P&L this month. It's okay.
Yeah.
Just keep going,
Yeah.
because if you stop because of that and you lose the value, you stop putting your energy into the value you're creating, that's going to push the whole thing forward, then that's how you can kind of just get burnt out. Versus like, man, keep pushing into that value and hire or bring on people that can do the jobs that need to be done better than you, frankly, for those areas. And I will also say too, with that, there's like a balance there. We've over the last like 7 months, we kind of started as almost like a New Year's resolution, looking at business and life things, and not just from like a financial perspective. So, because like life stuff different, but business wise, we've been thinking about like, okay, are we, where have we like leaned too far into like tech plugins? Like you can start adding up how much you spend on tech plugins, and you're like, how am I spending this much money a month
Yeah.
on all these subscriptions and all
Yeah.
this stuff? It's like, whoa, this my business is spending a lot of money on this stuff. Do I need all of these things? So there's a balance there too, for sure. And we've made some changes this year to just like trim down stuff that we thought was the right solution that we were putting money towards. We're like, oh no, we can solve this better we don't need to do this anymore, or we can solve this better in different ways. So there's a balance there, I think.
Yeah. I totally agree. The financial planner in me is like, everyone should check their subscriptions because you have zero idea how much
Yes.
you're spending on those.
Yeah, because you're like, oh, $15 a month, whatever.
Yeah. And
Pile it
again, like
on.
freeing up $15 a month in and of itself is probably not going to move your needle very much. But when
No.
you like track that out over hundreds of things, and it's like, when was the last time you really used like Canva Pro? Like maybe all the
Yeah.
time. Maybe
Right.
you got it your first year because you thought it was going to be really important and you haven't used it since. Like,
Right.
and when that adds up with lots of those, yeah, part of me, the financial planner in me is like screaming that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's good just even a gut check, like, oh, like for our personal stuff, like one thing was like, oh, so we have like, all these subscriptions, Netflix and Prime and, Apple Plus, and I was like, YouTube TV. I was like, I don't even know if I realized that we have all these, and because I don't know, and what they all cost, like actually seeing them all together, like, oh, okay, let's get rid of a couple of these things.
Yeah, you think like cable is so expensive, I wouldn't get cable. And then you're like, well, you've got like 10 different like streaming platforms all for like
Yeah,
$15 a month. And you're like, nah,
yeah,
it's about the same.
yeah. All of a
Uh,
sudden, it's the same as cable. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so something that is unique to you over your journey, not just the fact that it hasn't been just one business, but it's been a conglomerate of them, is that you've also been doing all of them with your wife, Jill. You guys literally live at work and work
Hmm.
together and run these businesses together. What's that been like navigating business, personal? When are you business partners and when are you spouses? How have you guys navigated that?
Yeah, I mean, really, we're basically both all the time, and it's more like, yeah, I think the way we've been navigating it recently that has worked. I'll tell you what's worked and what has not worked. What's worked has having a schedule, frankly, especially with we have four kids now. They're all 6 years and younger, so four young kids, and we work from home, especially in the summertime. They're here a lot. They're not at school, and so it really has worked to have a schedule and to really like stand for that, both in the business side of things and the marriage side of things. Like I have in my calendar, every Monday night is Jill's and my night. We're fortunate to have our in-laws live across the road here on the farm, so our kiddos can often go hang with them, and Jill and I can just go on a walk or whatever, have some time. So
Mm.
same thing business wise, like really scheduling out stuff, weekly meetings and all of that kind of stuff. And I think just like we also on kind of the other side of that coin, like we conversationally like to hold things like more loosely. Like, hey, if we're maybe it's 9 o'clock at night, but we have this business idea, we just want to talk about it. If the other person's into it or is open to listening, like we'll hold it loosely. We'll talk about it, even though it's we were laying on the couch watching Ted Lasso, and wait, pause it, hold on, I got to tell you about this idea, and so I think there's that too. Those things have worked really well for us. We love to brainstorm an idea. We always say like, there's no bad ideas during a brainstorm. Afterward, we can talk about how bad that idea was. But no, just kidding.
In this moment, it's not bad, but once we're done with this conversation, I'll tell you that it was really bad.
Yeah, yeah. What were you thinking? Yeah, yeah. No, but yeah, we love to brainstorm too. So there's definitely a lot of that. I think what hasn't worked is so trying to go back. So what didn't work well in the past was like there was a lot of tension when it was just Jill and I of like who's the boss basically, because like when we were shooting weddings,
Mm.
um, Jill was the primary photographer. I was just the second shooter, and I always joked I was really just the pack mule there to carry all of her camera bags and set up all her flashes and stuff. So um, so I struggled with like, no, you're here like working for her. You're not in charge right now. Like just just help, just do what the boss says, kind of thing. So I think that navigating that whole dynamic, we just I didn't step into that well in years past, and we would get in like we get in a fight about she told me to go do something on a wedding day, and I'd be like, do I really need to do that right now? She'd be like, I'm asking you to do it. I listen to me. I've shot lots of weddings, but I'm like, all right, I don't. We get into like, I don't think I need to, right? Whatever.
Yeah.
So I think both trying to like, like me, like not understanding this is what's needed in the moment. Um, I think that hasn't worked. And I think also something that this is maybe like not that specific, but I think like we've learned a lot more about ourselves in the last few years. Like I've learned more about me personally. Jill's learned more about herself personally, and I think like there was a lot I just didn't realize about me that affected the way we would interact in business and of course in personal life too. But I think just like getting to know myself more. Like we started doing marriage coaching, gosh, 5 years ago now. And that has been huge. You had Julia on the podcast, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for listeners, he's referencing Julia Woods, who was episode maybe like 10, 9 or 10. And she does like an incredible transformational coaching for couples. And so feel free to go
Yeah,
listen to
super
that
awesome.
and look
Yeah,
her up.
definitely check out Julia. She is amazing. I mean, she was instrumental in us like rebuilding our marriage. 5 years ago, and yeah, where we are today, it is. I never knew marriage could be like this, and it's awesome.
Mm,
Not to say that it's easy and that we don't, have any problems. We have all of the problems are still here. It's just a whole new perspective on all that with what we've learned through coaching. So yeah, but I think both of us learning more about ourselves, like what we're good at, how we like to do something, all that has like made the way we work now much better. And not to say we've arrived, but we both have noticed like, so we have a newborn who's 6 months old, and Jill had taken a step back from really work in general because we've got 4 kids. We had, she was pregnant, newborn, and just in the last like couple months, Jill stepped back into like, okay, I'm going to start working again. And I've just noticed like, man, this is awesome. I'm so grateful for all the gifts she has that I
mm,
do not have, and we're working together like we never have before. And it's really awesome.
that's awesome. I love hearing that. So, what has surprised you the most about your journey of entrepreneurship?
Um, I knew you were going to ask that question, but I didn't think about what I was going to say. uh, I wanted to have a really authentic response. So
Hey, and here it
yeah,
is. Here's your time to shine.
yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that are unexpected about it. I think one thing you said, what's the most unexpected?
Unexpected, or what surprised you the most? Like if you had
Surprised
this
me the
if you had
most.
this vision from high school and college of what Farmer Buddy would be doing versus kind of where you're at now, the success you've
Mhm.
achieved, like what surprised you the most about what that felt like, what that experience was like?
You really, thank you. I need you to really tee it up for me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now I had time to think. Um, I would say one big thing is like I I often still go into this thought, but I much more in the past would have this thought like, well, once I get here, then you know this will be better, or this will change, or the grass will be greener once I get past this level of stuff, or this goal in the business, or whatever. Um, and like there is some truth to that. It's not like that's wrong. But I just thought that was like, you know solid gold truth. Like, oh yeah, once you make a certain amount of money, or once you have like a certain amount of free time or something, whatever your thing is, and I just realized like, no, there's not. There's going to be benefits there. There's going to be lots of good things, but it's not like, and now everything's great,
Mm,
and I've arrived or something. It's like, no. I like listening to the My First Million podcast,
hmm.
and they have these guys on, that are like crazy successful. They always talk about how like you think even these guys at these way successful levels with hundreds of millions are like, you look at them and think like, yeah, so, but you feel that way now, right? Like you feel like you've arrived. And they're like, yeah, no, I just kind of go to the next thing that I want to do. So my, to be clear, not my scenario, but not hundreds of millions, but
When I was
but I
listening to this
think,
podcast with all my peers who are the Rockefellers and
yeah, yeah, exactly, all my friends. But yeah, no, I think for me, like a dream was like, oh, if I had my own farm someday, because I was always farming other people's land, um, and then that dream came true, and it's like it is great having your own farm, um, but it's not going to satisfy you completely. It's not going to be like, and I've arrived and that's it.
Mm,
So I think that has been a surprising thing and a good lesson to like relearn, because I keep tricking myself into like, oh yeah, but if we hit this target, if we build this structure, then then you'll feel better
mm,
about this thing. And again, there is truth to that. Like, you'll solve a problem and that will be good and it'll feel good. But it's not like, and so that's it. It's like, no, and then there's going to be more to do. And that's okay. That's a good thing.
Yeah, I think that that's true. That theme has come up a lot on this podcast. And I was talking to one of the guests, Joel Ankney, whose podcast actually airs today. But he was
Cool.
talking about, he's kind of on the latter end of his career. He's thinking about more like exit planning, but was saying like his definition of success, or kind of what he was longing for, changed throughout the years, because as he would achieve that next level, almost the line would move backwards, like would move further
Mm-hmm.
ahead. And it's like, oh, well, if, like for you, if I build this structure and we're able to rent it out, and so we've got all this other stuff going on, like that'll be awesome. And then we'll be able to rest. And then that happens. And then there's the next thing. And we kind of trick ourselves into thinking that like we will one day arrive. And
Mm-hmm.
that's just not how this life works.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we all wish we could
Yeah.
arrive, but
That's our hope for eternity, just bleeding into the wrong places.
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Um, what was the low point for you on this journey? I mean, what we've talked about so far
Mm.
sounds like amazing, but I'm sure it's come with challenges and seasons that are harder than others. So, what was the low for you?
There's been several low points. One that is I'm just thinking of because Jill was looking through an old hard drive of pictures, and we found pictures from back in 2012 at our old rental farm when the derecho hit. Did you live in Virginia when the derecho happened?
No,
Do you know what?
I
Okay.
have no idea what you're saying to me right now.
Okay. I think
was
derecho,
that
it's
was that a
Spanish.
plague?
No, but I mean, it could, yes, it was just as bad as a plague. So, for anyone who's in Virginia in 2012, you're going to know what I'm talking about. This storm came, Leland, and it came out of nowhere. And I'm pretty sure derecho means from the left. I think it's Spanish, but it came in from the west and blew across the state and just had horizontal winds, and it caused a ton of damage. And the crazy thing was, it wasn't like 100-mile swath of winds. It was like these pockets of 90 miles an hour. So like back then, you could be driving down the highway after the derecho hit, like, and you'd see like a forest on one side, and there'd just be a section that's like 100 yards wide where all the trees are just snapped in half, like 30 feet up, like
Whoa.
big, huge pine trees would just be whoosh, like a matchstick. And it was so that hit our farm in 2012. And Jill was looking back through old pictures and saw pictures of the aftermath. Oh my goodness, that was really bad because we were only a couple of years into farming. We had very limited cash and reserves. It hit in the middle of summer, um, and basically we had let's see, we had 2,000 chickens, meat chickens on pasture on this hillside. We drove out to go check on them that night to see, like, okay, how did they survive after this derecho hit? And picture, there's supposed to be 1,000 chickens in one set of these shelters and 1,000 chickens in another set of these shelters that are like basically like a big box of sheet metal and or roofing metal and chicken wire that they live in. Supposed to be 30 of them in the pasture, 30 of these boxes with 2,000 chickens spread across them. All of those are gone.
Oh
No
my
chickens,
gosh.
no boxes. The boxes are the chicken shelters. They're all just gone. So they
Wow.
literally had blown to like the other side of the hill. And all of our infrastructure was down. We didn't have power for like 3 days. It was crazy. And luckily, we had some of our best friends visiting, Josh and Mandy Poe, who live in Virginia Beach. You know
Yep.
them, I'm
Shout out to
sure.
the pose.
Oh, shout out to the Poes. They were actually coming out to they had just gotten married. They were coming out to like babysit the farm for us, and so they were going to do like a day or two of kind of learning all the systems from me, and then they were going to give Jill and I a night away because they knew we were like in the trenches and could use a break. And they get there the first night they get there, the derecho hits, and so they spent the rest of the weekend like the farm was hanging on by a thread, man. We barely kept all the animals alive. We really only lost, I mean, a small amount of chickens considering what could have
Wow.
happened. The cows all survived. The pigs all survived. But it was totally crazy. And I
Wait, so
thought
you
like
said
this is
a
the end
lot
of
of
the
the
farm.
chickens survived. Where did you find them?
So
Like they all blew
they were
away.
the next they were the next field over. So we had to carry them all back to we filled up this water cube so that they could get water. It's like a 250-gallon cube on a trailer. We filled it up down in the creek, brought it up on this trailer to the top of this hill, and then brought all the chickens to it so they could get water. Because I didn't mention, but this derecho hit, I believe it was in July. It was the height of summer. So it was like 97 degrees for the next 3 days after this. So
Gosh.
we had no power, no water. Josh, Mandy, and I all slept in the front hall of the farmhouse that we lived in because there was no AC and it was just so hot even at night. We just slept there with like the door open.
Gosh.
It was
That is
it was a low
wild.
point.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
sounds like a low point.
yeah.
Um, so this is a podcast all about success. But
Mhm.
if you poll anybody on the street and ask them what to define success, you're going to get a different meaning from different people. So for you, how would you define success and how would you know if and when you have achieved it?
Um, it's a great question. I have a feeling I might say something similar to what others have said, but the most important things to me, um, personally, that feel like success are um, when I'm connected with the Lord, when Jill and I are connected, and our relationship is close, and when I'm getting to spend a lot of time with my kids and my friends. That feels like the most in terms of just personal. Um, that's like top priorities. And then I think like business wise, success for me has a lot to do with legacy.
Mm,
And I just think, especially because like with farming, so many, all of our, not all, but most of our neighbors are like fifth, sixth generation farms. Um, farms that they've passed down from kid to kid to kid, and so it's kind of in the farming DNA to think legacy. And so I think that in business, what legacy am I leaving for my family, for the couples that come through here that get married here, for the people that buy meat from us off the farm, and the health and um, the good food that they're getting for their family. So I think like that having a sense of legacy makes me feel successful. And I think kind of like what we were just saying earlier, like always remembering that there's gonna be another hill to climb. You're gonna think like
mm.
once I get to the top of this hill in business, I've made it. I've summited Everest, and there's gonna be another. There's gonna be another one. If you're an entrepreneur, you're gonna get to the top of that hill. Doesn't matter who you are, and go. I mean, look at like Jeff Bezos. He's like,
Mhm.
okay, so now I'm gonna go to space.
Yeah.
Like,
I have conquered everything on Earth, and so now we will conquer beyond Earth.
yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what it's so in our DNA. And I think that's one of my good buddies who's an entrepreneur here in Lexington. And I talk a lot about this because he asked the question, like, when do you feel like enough is enough? And it's like, well, you got to remember, like, there's not, it, there is like you want to take care of your family, those kinds of things. There is that level of things for sure. And then it's like, um, yeah, and then I think it's like you're gonna just keep finding hills to climb, even if you have a lot of worldly success. Um, so yeah, so that's where I go back to like the biggest things for me are when I'm in right relationship with the people most important to me. That's awesome, and when
Mm,
I'm leaving a legacy that will go on for longer than my time here, then that's awesome. And I
mm,
see that's what we're building or leaning into with building lodging here, so that people could come back and stay here and experience the beauty of this place. And that's what we're doing with having marriage retreats, which we just started last year, and yeah, and they're going really well. Our marriage coach Julia leads those, and we've attended all my wife and I have attended all of them so far. And yeah, that's we want to pour into marriages and see
mm.
marriages thrive beyond their wedding day. here at the farm. So yeah, um,
That's amazing.
legacy, love it.
That's an amazing vision that I haven't heard you articulate before, but the idea of like investing in marriages, not just on their wedding day, but using this space as like a continued, we want to be for these marriages and continue to like fortify them even after kind of the initial day is really amazing.
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah,
buddy, thank you so much for being on the Self-Employment Success Podcast today. It's just
yeah,
a
man.
joy
Thanks for
having you
having
here.
me.
All right.
Oh, thanks for having me, Leland. Talk to you later.
Bye.